Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by Gerry Hamilton. Going to talk about the Texas tight ends today. This edition of On Texas Football brought to you by our friends at Hargrove Roofing. We'll tell you more about Hargrove later in the show. But, Gerry, we're actually going to start this hearing a cut from Steve Sarkisian after Monday's press conference. He talked about the tight end, a lot of versatility in that room, versatility in position group with the personnel groupings. So here's Sark talking about the tight ends.
I think they're all coming along. They're all kind of, like you said, different body types in somewhat different phases in our program. And I think once we get through Saturday, I think we're going to have multiple personnel groupings for 12. I think to the average fan, there's two tight ends out there, but I think we're going to be really specific with what two tight ends are out there doing what when they're out there together. And so, it's not just going to be, hey, 12 personnel and the first two guys run out. We may have 2 or 3 different 12 personnel groupings that we use in conjunction with who are the wideouts that are out there with them too.
All right, Gerry. So Sark echoing a lot of the stuff we've talked about on the channel, just the versatility in that room, the ability to have multiple versions of 12 personnel. Maybe we even see a 13 personnel package. Maybe they're that diverse. But Gerry, this room kind of reminds me at this point of where the room was in 2022 when you had Jatavian Sanders coming into his own. You had Gunnar Helm really kind of starting to turn the corner a little bit. You had a veteran presence. Now I think we all hope Jack Endries has a better season in 2025 than Jaleel Billingsley had in 2022. But it's a room, Gerry, with a ton of upside for the future. As good as it might be now, I think we'll look into 2026 and 27, and this room is going to be off the charts.
I agree, and it's funny just how things change. Like in the spring, it was like, wow, what's this tight end position going to look like, especially after Jordan Washington went down and missed a lot of time in the spring. Jack Indries wasn't there. Emory Winston was there, but no Nick Townsend. He was one of the few guys that wasn't a December graduate. And we left spring practice saying, what position has the most to prove? And like tight end was in that discussion. And now here we're at on August 12th. I think it's one of becoming a position of strength for this team. And that only happens if, yes, Jack Indries is good as you thought out of the portal, which he has been. So a young guy takes a step. Spencer Shannon in 12 personnel as a blocker. Jordan Washington comes back bigger, better than what he was. And we'll talk about some of these guys individually in a second, I know. Then Nick Townsend is a super freak athlete at that position. Then Emory Winston, who's now out with injury, which we'll get to. But that position has come a long way since spring football, some with the additions of guys that weren't there and some with some guys with some growth since the spring.
Gerry, let's start with Jack Indries. And Arch has lit up anytime he's talked about Jack Indries. I got a feeling Indries and Arch Manning are going to have a pretty good rapport just based on the early returns from Arch throughout the summer and even what we've heard in the early part of camp. Leonga Lafau was talking about how tough he is to cover, number one, and number two, how much of a willing blocker he is. I know they kicked the tires on Max Claret, Gerry, who's out of Purdue, who's now out of Ohio State, but the staff was patient. They waited for the right guy, and I think at this point, I think it's safe to say they hit a home run given the early returns on Jack Indries.
Yeah, very productive player at Cal, a guy that's used to playing with a big-time quarterback. Fernando Mendoza, who's now at Indiana as an NFL prospect, was his quarterback at Cal. And you know what makes a quarterback light up when asked about a tight end? Catches everything, always runs the right route with the right timing. He's dependable. Arch knows, and any quarterback knows, one, they can be a safety valve. Two, it's a short yardage guy. Those guys have to be precise with what they – Gunnar Helm was precise with what he did in the passing game. I think you're going to see very similar to Jack Indries. And if he's a upside blocker, maybe more so than Gunnar Helm, who is in the NFL, by the way, then that even gives Texas more at that position to go with the guys we're about to talk about.
Gerry, let's start with Spencer Shannon. He's been there a minute. He's a veteran. He's getting his opportunity now to step forward and be a part of the rotation. I think it's safe to say at this point, his blocking has him. I mean, in that first scrimmage, the first time they lined up in 12 personnel, it was Jack Endries and Spencer Shannon. I don't think, at least I'm not worried about Spencer Shannon as a blocker. When you look at that second tight end, though, Gerry, I think it's a case of which comes around first. Is it Spencer Shannon being a factor somewhat in the pass game, or Jordan Washington's ability as a blocker in terms of who, for the long run this season, is going to be that second tight end on the field?
Yeah, Spencer Shannon definitely is a more of a niche player at tight end. He's a blocker, right? And he's the biggest probably frame in terms of height and arm length of any tight end Texas has. And he's come a long way as a blocker. And of course, that frame had to get stronger over time coming out of Mater Dei, which is a really good program. But he still had to fill out that frame quite a bit. And he's now headed into year 3 where he should have the armor, as Rod calls it, on that frame and added all that strength to be a factor in the run game. But like you said, what comes first? It's going to be matchup dependent, who they're playing, how the season plays out. But, you start getting really kind of aggressive in thinking is what happens if you put Jack Indries and Jordan Washington out there in 12 personnel? How much pressure are you putting on the defense to go with a Wingo and a DeAndre Moore on the field at the same time? That gets to be where you get greedy, right? You think about what can be from an offensive explosivity standpoint. And I think it's a great thought, Jeff. And I think it's going to be a mix and match. If Jordan Washington becomes the Saturday blocker that Spencer Shannon is, then I think when they're in 12, you see a lot of injuries in Jordan Washington because that puts a lot of pressure on a defense to cover.
Jerry, let me ask you this in regards to Spencer Shannon. Do we feel like he's a good enough blocker, a capable enough blocker? The Kyle Flood doesn't need to tinker with that 6-0 line package. We saw it a lot in 22 and 23. Didn't see it at all last year. And honestly, I think if Shannon can fill that role as the true inline guy in this group, I don't know that they'll necessarily need it again this year.
Yeah, I don't think Sark ideally wants to go to that. Look, I think in the SEC, I think while in theory that 6-0L package has some, in theory, is a good thought, I still think you have to put pressure on defenses in the SEC. And if you have somebody out there that somebody does not have to be concerned about in the passing game, I think that takes away from your ability to put maximum pressure on a defense. So I think we will continue to see less. We didn't see any of the 6-0L package last year. And I don't think Sark wants to go that direction. I think in an ideal world, when Sark goes 12, he wants both of those guys to be a threat in the passing game so long as they're good enough blockers. And I really think that's where this is going to go.
Jerry, let's talk about Jordan Washington. Basketball background, insane upside. Just you've watched his body develop. I remember watching him his first spring practice and just looking at the frame and thinking, man, if he fills out and the athleticism's there, they might really have something at tight end. And the further removed we get from that first scrimmage, Jerry, we're even hearing some nuggets starting to trickle out about, he didn't just have a really good scrimmage. He's showing stuff that makes you feel like he could be a big-time guy in this offense.
I always go back to spring of his freshman year at Texas, and Jeff Banks said future star is what he said about Jordan Washington. Then he got injured. He had some big plays in the spring game. Remember the leaping catch, Jeff, where somebody took out his legs? Mm-hmm. People were talking about him coming out of the spring game. Obviously, he played a little bit last year, but it was going to be a very small role. Then he gets hurt in the spring, right? So it's easy to forget about a kid's talent when they're injured. But now, based on what we've heard after Saturday's scrimmage, he was making plays after the catch. And if he starts making plays after the catch, he is going to force his way to be more of a part of this offense in the passing game. Because Jack Indries is probably not the guy that's going to make a lot of guys miss. That doesn't mean he can't make a guy or two miss. But if Jordan Washington is that guy, he's going to have a big role in this offense. And this is the time where he should start to take that next step.
Yeah.
You know what? When you're injured, you get motivated because what's he heard in the offseason? Jack Indries is coming in, a potential NFL draft pick, a guy that could be an all SEC tight end. Well, not as much Jordan Washington talk. That should motivate you headed into the season. And I think that's what we're seeing with Jordan Washington. Not that he didn't work hard, wasn't motivated, but when somebody else is brought in from the portal at your position, if that doesn't motivate you, you normally fall by the wayside. And I think we're seeing the opposite from Jordan Washington. It's motivating him. And now that he's healthy, I think he has a chance to become the playmaker at the tight end position that a lot of fans and all of us thought he could be.
100%. You look across the board with this team, Jerry, we've seen that over the years. A portal guy comes in, but then somebody inevitably steps up that's been on the roster already, and Texas usually ends up having an NFL caliber player emerge from that group. We'll keep talking about the tight ends here in just a minute, but right now, I want to say thank you very much to our friends over at Hargrove Roofing with offices across Texas, including in Austin, as well as Louisiana and in Arkansas. Hargrove Roofing will take care of all of your roofing needs, plus they're Longhorn friendly with partners like former defensive tackle Stevie Lee. They're the most pro burnt orange roofing company out there. No one wants to turn their home over to a company they can't trust. So call Hargrove today for a free, no strings attached roof inspection. Just call 512-645-3202. Again, that's 512-645-3202. Hargrove Roofing, know who's on your roof. Jerry, we talked about Jordan Townsend, the upside. That word comes to the forefront when you're talking about Nick Townsend, and he wasn't here for spring. We saw him in those early practices, just typical freshman in his first practice, trying to just figure out right from left. But as he's gotten acclimated, this goes back to what Jeff Banks talked about before, and we talked about it here on the channel plenty with his athleticism. But I've never heard Jeff Banks talk about any of his young tight ends the way he talked about Nick Townsend. Jerry, I just think he's so athletic. They're going to end up finding something for him to do, some way for him to help them win games this year.
They did that a little Saturday. We were told they had a couple of specialty plays for him. But look, he is the best athlete at the tight end position at Texas since Jermichael Finley. The question is he even actually a better athlete than Jermichael Finley? I think he's a faster athlete. Now, Jermichael Finley was a D1 level basketball player, a little taller, a little longer arms. But Nick Townsend has real speed. And at 240 pounds, look, the crazy thing about him from last year on the track, his spring on the track, because he wasn't an early graduate, he started track season at 226, 228. He ended track season at 238. So he gained 10, 12 pounds. And his times went down in the 200 meters. He almost qualified for state. He gained weight during a track season. Most guys lose weight during a track season. He gained 10 to 12 pounds during track season, and his times continue to get faster. That's almost like unheard of with a big guy. So that tells you his level of athleticism. And he is a true competitor. He is a physical guy. I was once at a practice, and I've told the story before. He was long snap, short snap, tight end, wildcat quarterback, running back, wide receiver, middle linebacker, kickoff return, punt block team. I mean, I was like, the only thing he didn't do was kickoff return. He lined up at the edge from his linebacker. He walked down over to the edge. This dude's just a baller. He's a baller. And the thing with him that I've talked about, seeing him as much as I did, is he going to make contested catches? Because he doesn't have the longest arms in the world, right? He doesn't have short arms, but he doesn't have that Jermichael Finley wingspan. So is he in traffic, contested catches, going to go catch the football? So far, we're hearing he is. If he does that effectively at the Power 4 level, he is going to be a terror because he's 6'3", 240, and runs in the low 4.5s. There aren't many guys like that playing tight end at the college level or NFL level.
Jerry, let's look at the rest of the room. You got Ridge Barker's a walk-on from Lovejoy, who's if you go out to practice, you'll notice him. He's in the mix there, mixing it up. Will Randall, Arch Manning's former teammate at Isidore Newman's, had a long road coming back from a knee injury senior year. The big one, though, is Amari Winston. Like we said, that injury is going to put him on the shelf for a few months. And I don't know, Jerry, if they would have gotten something out of him this year, but a guy that the more you watch him, he kind of grows on you the more you watch him, which says a lot, I think, for a guy that was almost out of sight, out of mind, because he committed early and was just committed, didn't take any visits. And I don't know, you almost took it for granted that he was a part of that class.
Tremendous hands and ball skills is what we've seen from him at the college level early on. And that's a practice, right? But the spring, and then before this separated shoulder that's going to knock him out for a couple of months, we're hearing. Bobby Burton was first to report that. So, but this guy was catching everything. He has a big catch radius. He showed some body control, the ability to adjust to the ball in the air. He was off to an extremely fast start, and I do think he would have factored in this year. And he still may factor in when he comes back. Obviously, he's had a big setback, but yeah, he was a guy that was already set to kind of outplay a ranking coming out of high school. And I think he definitely will help this program in the future because I think Arch or the next quarterback at Texas, whoever that is, will say the same things they're saying about Jack Endries in the future with him, and that's because he's going to catch the football. He's going to be a third down pass catcher on the third and shorts, and he's going to run the right route, be where he's supposed to be.
So, Jerry, just to recap, Jack Endries is the number 1 tight end. Spencer Shannon, the first tight end on the field when they're in 12 personnel. Jordan Washington working into that mix. They've got Nick Townsend, something brewing for him. That's where we stand right now, a couple of weeks out from the season opener. By the time we get to the Texas A&M game at the end of the regular season, what do you think the makeup of that tight end room is?
I think it'll be Indries, number 1, Jordan Washington, 2 specialty plays for Nick Townsend, and I think Spencer Shannon will be used in the inline run game. That could be goal line situations, but that could be in some certain 12 personnel packages, matchup dependent. But I do think Jordan Washington, if he continues on the path he is right now, he's going to have more of a role as this season moves along. And I do think Nick Townsend, as long as he picks up everything within the scheme that he needs to, he just has too much athleticism not to make some plays in SEC for Texas in SEC play.
Well, Jerry, for the first time in a long time, I'll tip my cap to Sark and Jeff Banks for this. The tight end position at Texas, they're recruiting good talent, they're developing said talent, and they've got a plan on how to use that position. So it's a very nice change of pace, Jerry, from where we've been in previous seasons with the tight ends.
No, it is, and this is a position, I think, becoming a position of potential strength as the season moves along. And depending on what Jack Endries does NFL-wise after this year, the future is really bright at this position because of Nick Townsend and Amari Winston and Spencer Shannon has time left on his clock as well. This position will be one of strength headed into spring practice.
All right, Jerry, thank you for the knowledge and expertise. As always, thank you to Matthew for producing it. Thank you to the entire On Texas Football staff. Thank you to Hargrove Roofing for sponsoring this edition of On Texas Football. If you're not a member, over at ontexasfootball.com, get over there right now. Sign up using the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $39.95. Recruiting is about to pick up again with the high school football season starting. Obviously, we are knee-deep in football talk with preseason practice. We're in between a couple of scrimmages right now, a couple of weeks out from the season opener. You don't want to miss anything. Again, the promo code is OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $39.95. Make sure you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or over on the site, you're not missing anything leading up to the start of what should be a special season for the Longhorns. For Jerry, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, welcome.